The HOA tried to have me arrested for trespassing on my own lawn. Tiny problem with that plan. I was the circuit judge assigned to the hearing that could dissolve their entire HOA. It's 6:17 on a Saturday morning. I'm halfway up a ladder cleaning solar panels when two sheriff's cruisers roll into my driveway. Right behind them sits a white BMW with the plate Luxury Living. Brenda Kessler steps out, arms folded, smiling like she just won the lottery. She thinks she finally got me. What she doesn't realize is she just handed me the cleanest corruption case I'd seen in 23 years on the bench. My name's Marcus Thornfield. I spent 23 years as a circuit court judge handling civil rights and property disputes. After that long on the bench, you develop a pretty good eye for people who get a little bit of authority and start acting like it gives them unlimited power. I've seen it in politicians, in developers, in bureaucrats, and yes, plenty of times in HOA boards. But this story didn't start in a courtroom. It started when life reminded me that some fights matter more than any case I ever presided over. My wife Sarah was diagnosed with breast cancer 4 years ago. Those were long months. Chemo, surgeries, waiting for scan results, watching someone you love fight through pain while trying to stay strong for your daughter Emma. Sarah beat it. She went through every round and came out the other side tougher than she went in. Once she was clear, we both agreed it was time for a real change. I retired early at 52. We sold our old house, and we moved to Willowbrook Estates looking for something quieter. Tree-lined streets, families walking dogs in the evening. The kind of place where you think the biggest problem you'll face is deciding what color to paint your mailbox. That piece lasted exactly 3 days. The first thing I did after we settled in was build a proper wheelchair ramp for Sarah while she was still regaining strength. Solid oak, built to every ADA specification, with permits pulled through the city myself. A few weeks later, I had licensed contractors install a full solar array on the roof. 36 panels, everything by the book. The system cut our electric bill from $340 a month down to almost nothing. For the first time in years, I felt like we were actually building the life we had talked about during all those hospital nights. Brenda Kessler had been president of the HOA for 6 years, former real estate agent. She drove that white BMW with the Luxury Living plate and carried a literal ruler in her purse so she could measure grass height, mailbox dimensions, and anything else that didn't match her vision. She patrolled the neighborhood every afternoon like she was conducting a military inspection. The first citation arrived the same afternoon the solar panels went up. Aesthetic violation for $150. The next morning, another one showed up for the wheelchair ramp. Unauthorized exterior modification, another $150. Both projects had full city permits. I double-checked the documents myself. Brenda didn't care. I walked over to her house that same evening to sort it out like an adult. She wasn't there. She was 3 doors down measuring Mrs. Chen's mailbox, telling her it was 3 inches too tall. Mrs. Chen, a quiet retired paralegal in her 70s, just looked tired. I waited until Brenda finished, then explained that both the ramp and panels were properly permitted and ADA compliant. She gave me a small, tight smile and said, "The architectural committee will review your request." That phrase stuck with me. People who actually follow their own rules don't talk like that. 3 days later, we received notice of an emergency board meeting. When Sarah, Emma, and I walked into the community center, it was obvious what was happening. Only 12 people in a neighborhood of 847 homes. Brenda had called her own crowd. She had a projector set up and gave a full PowerPoint presentation with zoomed-in photos of my solar panels taken from multiple angles. She called them visual pollution that threatened property values. Then she showed pictures of the ramp and labeled it a safety hazard. Mrs. Chin spoke up quietly. It's for his wife after her cancer treatment. Brenda's deputy, Patricia Mills, cut her off immediately. We can't make exceptions based on personal situations. I sat there listening to that sentence land in the room and felt my old courtroom habits come back. I started asking basic questions. Could we see the architectural committee meeting minutes where these aesthetic standards were formally adopted? When was the last time the committee actually met? I turned to Bob Hendricks, whose massive unpermitted backyard hot tub had never received a single citation. "Bob, When did your installation get architectural approval?" He turned red and mumbled that it was different. Patricia suddenly became very interested in her notebook when I asked about her own shutters. The architectural committee, it turned out, hadn't held a formal meeting in over 2 years. Brenda had been deciding everything herself. They still pushed the vote through anyway. $500 in fines, 30 days to remove the ramp and panels or face liens. What came next was a steady campaign of pressure. Thick legal envelopes from a real estate law firm threatening foreclosure. Glossy flyers in every mailbox warning about certain homeowners undermining neighborhood standards. A private Facebook group that Emma wasn't invited to, full of posts about maintaining neighborhood character and protecting the community from outside influences. The language was careful, but I'd handled enough civil rights cases over the years to recognize what it really meant. While that was happening, I started requesting financial records. What I found went far beyond petty harassment. The HOA hadn't filed its required annual reports with the state in nearly 3 years. The community pool contractor hadn't been paid in months. Landscaping expenses had tripled, while the actual work got noticeably worse. Then came the $47,000 in emergency landscaping consultation fees, paid to a company owned by Brenda's boyfriend Tyler Manning. Tyler's only visible qualification was owning a lawnmower. No competitive bids, no board votes, no detailed invoices. Mrs. Chen sat at my kitchen table one afternoon, looking through the stack of records with her reading glasses on. She tapped one page and said simply, "This isn't landscaping. This is something else." Then Brenda filed the trespassing complaint. Her claim was that when I cleaned my solar panels, I had stepped on a 6-inch strip of HOA common area grass near my property line. 6 inches. Sheriff Martinez called me himself, clearly uncomfortable explaining it. I told him to move forward exactly as any other resident would face. No shortcuts. Brenda scheduled the arrest for 6 in the morning. She wanted neighbors watching on their way to work. Instead, when Deputies Williams and Rodriguez pulled up, I was already dressed and waiting on the porch with coffee for them. The ride to the station was quiet. Williams even apologized for the whole situation. When we walked into the station, the desk sergeant looked up and froze. "Judge Thornfield, what are you doing here?" The room went still. Williams turned to me slowly. I told him I had retired, but that I wanted the process to play out normally so I could see exactly how residents were being treated. Word spread quickly. Brenda was seen celebrating in her driveway, making calls, telling people she had finally removed the problem from the neighborhood. She even reached out to a reporter she knew. That was the moment my home office turned into a coordinated review. Emma organized every document and screenshot. Mrs. Chun went through years of financial transfers with precision of someone who had done this professionally. We found payments to shell companies, assessment increases that were never properly voted on by homeowners, and a pattern of targeting specific residents that went back years. Bob Hendricks tried to quietly offer Mrs. Chin a deal, drop her support for me, and her own citations would disappear. She recorded the entire conversation. We also brought in Janet Rodriguez, a former colleague who specializes in civil rights and fair housing cases. After reviewing the material, she told me this had moved well beyond typical HOA nonsense. Selective enforcement based on personal dislike, combined with the coded language in the Facebook group and the financial irregularities, opened the door to serious claims. The town hall meeting was called a few weeks later. The room was standing room only. 127 people packed in. Local news cameras in the back. The county prosecutor sat quietly observing. Brenda spoke first. She presented herself as the victim of a harassment campaign by difficult residents who didn't want to follow rules. Her voice cracked more than once. When it was my turn, I walked to the podium with one folder. I started with the payments to Tyler Manning. $47,000, with no bids, no approvals, and almost no documentation. I moved to the Facebook posts and the pattern of selective enforcement. I laid out the missing records and unfiled reports. The room stayed completely quiet except for the occasional creak of a chair. Then I said, "I haven't hired any outside lawyers for this. For 23 years, I was the circuit court judge assigned to civil rights and municipal cases, just like this one." You could feel the shift in the room. Brenda's attorney started gathering his papers. The county prosecutor stood up and confirmed that multiple criminal investigations had been opened: embezzlement, fraud, and civil rights violations. The vote to remove Brenda and dissolve the current board was 119 to 8. In the weeks that followed, Brenda lost her real estate license. Criminal charges were filed. She eventually took a plea deal, paid $89,000 in restitution, and moved out of state. Every improper fine that had been collected was refunded. The solar panels and the oak ramp stayed exactly where they were. The new board rewrote several policies and actually started holding real meetings. The neighborhood slowly changed. People started talking to each other again instead of avoiding eye contact over fear of citations. Mrs. Chen's dumplings became a regular feature at new monthly potlucks. Even Bob eventually came around after realizing the old way had left him isolated. Sarah's health improved noticeably once the constant stress disappeared. She started hosting small community planning sessions right from that same oak ramp Brenda had tried to force us to tear down. I began teaching part-time at the local law school, and we used part of the civil rights settlement to create a program that teaches homeowners their actual rights when dealing with HOAs. I also helped draft new state legislation requiring basic training for anyone serving on an HOA board. Last week I got another call from someone 2 states away dealing with a similar situation. I looked over at Sarah. She just smiled at me. Retirement is going to have to wait a little longer. Here's the truth. Moving into an HOA neighborhood does not mean you give up your rights. Fair housing laws still apply. Due process still applies. Selective enforcement is illegal. The best defense is simple. Document everything. Record every official conversation and meeting, and keep your own records organized from day one. Brenda thought the neighborhood belonged to her and her small circle. She found out the hard way that borrowed authority disappears the moment enough people decide to push back. If you've lived through your own HOA situation, drop it in the comments. I read through them. Hit like if you want to see more stories like this, and subscribe. There are plenty more Brendas out there, and every single one eventually meets the wrong quiet neighbor.